Welcome to the Zeducation podcast, where it's all about helping people and organizations unleash their greatness. Hosted by me, Pasitawa Haufano, and my brother.
That's me, Kalolo Haufano.
The Zeducation podcast features lively discussions.
When they share it, you see that they're beginning to feel empowered.
My heart, it's full of pride for me to be at Maitai Samoa.
As well as tips on leadership and business by some of the top minds and influencers around the world.
You don't necessarily need a degree these days. There's so many pathways to success.
Welcome to the Zeducation podcast. Welcome to our Zeducation podcast. You are joining a conversation with myself, Pasi, and my brother, Kalolo here. On this episode, we are going to talk about what we're seeing are the three hottest trends that we feel like is going to disrupt the future of education. So let's get into it.
It's interesting that a lot of people are sitting on the fence with what's happening as a trajectory for the future of all industries, but education in particular, because that's what we're passionate about, especially with generative AI. So I think it's very important that we discuss what we think the future trends are based on our experience, but also with having a bit of due diligence around understanding what's happening out there in the global market.
Yeah, it's part of our vision here is education to be trailblazers in innovative learning. And what that means is we're always looking for newer and not necessarily new, but better ways to improve the learning experience for our learners, our tawira. And so we've been in this space for years. We've been facilitators, and now we have a business with a team of facilitators, and we're constantly working with clients and tawira. And so we're seeing a lot and we're learning a lot. And so from all of this, and speaking from our experience and what we're seeing from our world, we are going to share the three hottest trends that we feel like that we really need to be mindful of and could potentially shape the future of education. Okay, so let's start off with the first trend that we're seeing, and that's artificial intelligence.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. I mean, it's one of those topics that's hot off the press. You have a company like OpenAI, ChatGPT, that was released in November 22. The topic of AI isn't new. It's a conversation that has been amongst everyone's mouths for years and years. In fact, I was on TikTok a couple of weeks ago, and there was a video of a guy in the 60s, a professor, who had forecasted that artificial intelligence will be the future of this world. But I think what differentiates the conversations of AI and what's been embedded prior to November 22 to now is the democratizing of AI. So anyone in this world can jump on and use AI and how they can embed it into their personal and work life. And I think that's what makes it such a big trend. And I think a lot of people right now are still trying to figure out how they're going to embed AI into the everyday work, particularly with educational upskilling.
Yeah, and you've probably heard that saying before, knowledge is power. And that was really true in the context of I know something that you don't know. Knowledge is more of a commodity now. It's so easy to access. It's so easy to share and exchange with people. AI has made it a lot more easier to find information, to process information and organize data as well. And so it's already disrupting education at the moment. I mean, I saw something on the news around universities and how they were concerned about how students are now using AI to write their reports and essays much more easier now. And it's like, how do you know if their work is original and not just something that AI produced easily for them? And is that necessarily a bad thing as well? And so this is something that even universities in the education sector are trying to navigate is how does AI fit into this context here and what we're doing?
Yeah, it's even universities or any tertiary provider is still trying to figure out what that looks like. At first glance, you'll think straight away, plagiarism. You're going out and getting something else to write it for you. Whereas, I often think of the concept when calculators came out and universities were like, oh my goodness, these guys aren't going to be manually in their brains calculating 1 + 1. They're using a machine like calculators to do it for you. We need to resist this change, resist. Whereas now you see it's enhanced the ability for professionals who do do mathematical calculations be much more better at their work. So when I think of technology like this where it's brand new, there's always going to be a level of resistance. But I think organizations like universities need to start adapting and seeing what that new normal is, and which is so fresh. It's only been a couple of months, but I still feel like they're still trying to figure it out. And eventually, I believe that they will embrace it and find that sweet spot or middle ground.
Yeah, I think, AI's come out in our generation. It's come out during our lifetime, which is pretty cool to witness something like this in comparison to like 10 to 20 years' time when we were in education, right? So it's a new, different world today. And this is kind of like the world that our kids or the generation after us are going to grow into. And it makes me think, even like with universities, but even as young as primary schools, what they're learning in school, is it preparing them for a world that exists? Like AI. And I feel like it needs to become the norm now. And, how young do we start introducing AI into schools where they start learning about it? And I think, in my opinion, there isn't really anything wrong with AI as long as, you can use it to achieve a worthy outcome or goal. But I think what we need to be mindful of is we don't want to rely so much on AI that it takes away from critical thinking and it takes away from creativity, like originality. It's easy to go on AI and be like, get the answer, or can you do this for me? But I think what we should take into consideration, especially when teaching in schools, is not forget about critical thinking side of things, problem solving, decision making without the technology. But even with the technology, how do I still apply critical thinking and creativity as well?
Yeah, I remember when I saw from just reading the newspaper every day back in November when they had released OpenAI, my first initial concern was, oh my goodness, like it's going to do a lot of the brain work for us. And then our brains naturally over time will become lazy. But I feel like that becomes more of a push for us to embed into educational programs the importance of soft skills like critical thinking, problem solving, empathy, leadership. What enhances in hard tech tools like AI that takes over a lot of our human skills, and I do suspect that a lot of jobs will be lost from this. It makes it more of a push for us to become much more mindful of the way that we conduct ourselves from a soft skills perspective.
Yeah, before we get into the second trend, which is actually the soft skills, which you're going to lead perfectly into, I just wanted to make one last comment on AI. And I think, it's such a great tool that's come out recently, and we need to start teaching people how to use it, because I do personally believe it's going to be the future, and it's going to be around. It's probably going to get bigger, and that's the future. And so, we need to prepare for it and learn how to weave that into what we're doing in everyday life even. But also we need to teach, coming back to what I said around critical thinking and creativity, and not losing the essence of that by relying too much on AI, is we need to start learning how to discern what is truth and what is lies. Because for me, like, AI technology is good at finding data and collating facts and information. But as human beings, we need to understand, we can't forget the human element of things as well. Things like empathy, respect, taking into consideration how another person feels when in terms of information and how that's portrayed. So I think it's important to acknowledge that as well. So I just wanted to say that I feel like it's important to mention, it's such a great tool, but we need to be mindful of it.
Yeah, just one last thought on that. I, in practical terms, have used ChatGPT to build a course, right? Like, for example, you can prompt it to say, build a leadership course on that's going to be spaced out for 16 hours with X amount of learning outcomes, and I want you to create quizzes for each of those modules, and I want you to cater this to a particular audience. And it does it well, but it doesn't do it perfectly. But I don't see right now that when you build content like this, because it's now democratized using AI, that you can just rely fully on it. There needs to be a co-piloting with a human to be able to teach those soft skills. So not only has it provide more efficiency in building, say, content for, say, courses, etc., I think it's still much more important to have that human factor to be there to help humans, human to human, learn these skills and apply it more effectively.
Yeah, and speaking from an employer's point of view, and a training provider, I think AI can definitely help build programs. It can help you structure the content, but it can't facilitate a program.
Agreed.
And so that's where I feel like that will always be a part in education. You will still need a human to human connection, collaboration, contribution aspect of learning. And so you can't take that away. But I think AI can definitely help you produce and create content and information and organize it a lot more quicker. And so that you could focus and devote more of your time and efforts on other things. So, but I think, hey, we're going to get into it. We're going to mention it now, which is the biggest trend. The next biggest trend that we're seeing is soft skills. And so, yes, you got the tech skills, you got AI, but I think just as important is the soft skills.
There's a very traditional narrative, right? Like you go to a job, you work hard, you do the mahi, you produce the results, and then you get promoted, right? But all too often, you get a lot of people that get promoted into leadership roles or managerial roles that don't have those soft skills. So this takes it even further around, so why soft skills are important. I think this is more of a medium-term issue, especially with the labor shortage, where you're promoting people to get into leadership roles that don't have the proper skill set. But human resource or HR need to start considering the importance of having as critical importance of job descriptions that they need a level of soft skills as well in their roles and responsibilities that they're promoting out there. So technology's making soft skills much more acute, but I also think of the current issues that are existing today with a potential recession that's happening, that a lot of people need to start learning how to manage teams now that they're in leadership roles as well.
Yeah, and to be more specific, some of the things that we're seeing as education in regards to soft skills are things like how to be assertive. How do you speak up and be confident? How do you be direct and clear in your communication? So, assertiveness is something that we're seeing. The other thing I would probably say is conflict management. There's always hard times. There's always troubles and trials. So as a human, how do you build resilience? How do you build a growth mindset? How do you deal with the problems that you're faced with, whether they're people or a task or process type issue? And so, those things are always going to be very important. And I feel like those are the biggest things that we're seeing specifically in regards to soft skills that we're doing in terms of training. What about you? What are you seeing?
Yeah, it's those exact same skills. But what I love about those skills is it's not just skills that you can use in the workplace. They're also transferable skills that they can take home in their role and responsibilities as parents, as maybe whatever community roles that they hold in their community. They're definitely transferable skills. So I just love the social impact portion to soft skills, because it's impactful not just for workplace but for everywhere else, for that individual as well.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So I feel like we've talked about the first trend there, which was AI, and the second trend was soft skills. What would be our third one, our last one?
Micro-credentials. Or micro-learning. You think of traditional programs that are typically taught over 20 weeks. I remember back in the days when we both used to teach programs for tertiary providers while working full-time jobs. A short course was typically 20 weeks. Whereas now, oh my goodness, that's super long. Sitting in a class for 3 to 4 hours every week over a period of 20 weeks is just for me, just right now in this day and age, just sounds draining. So micro-learning is the ability to learn things short and sharp, repetitive, in order to still produce the same results as if you were going to sit in a class for 20 weeks. So there's this massive push towards it. In fact, the educational system in New Zealand have come to realize that with the change to the new system, with micro-credentials being a big thing. And on top of micro-learning, it doesn't eliminate the fact that, say, a 20-week worth of course is insufficient anymore. It's pretty much breaking it down into micro courses. So, for example, you might get a national diploma in health and safety, but instead of doing that course over a period of a year or 2 years, well, how can you chunk that up into 3 and then skill stack that towards that qualification? Therefore, makes it much more easier for people to learn skills now, and therefore also progress with those skills in the future.
Yeah, and I like the concept of micro learning. It's not about taking a big course and watering it down or condensing it or squeezing it into like a more shorter version. That's not what it is. It's taking that long program with those awesome modules, taking those specific modules and calling that that's one program there. It's much more shorter and much more focused as well, and especially in the fast-paced and busy world that we live in, it's easier to fit in micro programs as opposed to your long 20-week, 40-week, 1 year, 3 year type of thing.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about micro learning or these micro programs is that you can come back to them. You can add it into a cycle. I don't believe that it should be a one and done or a drive through. I feel like you do this program and you come back to it in 6 months while you learn other ones along the way. Because for me, it's about consistency, but it makes it easier when you're taking it like bite sizes. Type of information, and it's the world that we live in. I mean, look at the kids that grow up and they can just go through Netflix and kind of pick and choose the shows that they want. Even as an adult, when I'm binge watching a show or a season, I sometimes skip things to the part that I really want. And things like AI, right now as adults, we just get things quicker. We want things faster. We want it now, and we can get it. That's the beauty. We live in a world where you can just get it so quickly. You don't have to go to read a whole encyclopedia book to get the information. Just go to AI, and it'll just give it to you like that with references. So I feel like it's the world that we live in. We've become conditioned as well. And so it just makes sense to deliver content or programs that fit the world that we live in as well.
Yeah, there's a Instagram realization and a TikTok videozation of short, fast, and simple, and you can just learn it. In fact, I watch videos of people teaching me stuff on TikTok, for example, and you just see a plethora of threads and comments around, oh, they didn't teach us this at school, or you taught me this within a couple of minutes where I sat in this class for so long to learn it. I also want to make sure that our listeners understand the importance of, or the differentiation between micro learning and also micro credentials. So micro credentials is pretty much a shorter version of what we typically would have as a longer course, like 20 weeks, etc. But micro learning or micro bite size is driven actually by a theory called space theory or space learning theory. So it's learning things really short and repetitive over a period of time, which also retains knowledge. So we hear that typical saying of, what you learn in a classroom, you only retain 10% of it after 30 days. While with this type of theory is you learn that knowledge in class one, and you get reminded or you review it through whatever it is, whether you review it through your own efforts or through some kind of mobile platform and gamification, which is a big trend right now, and you just review that same content over a space of time. And based on this science, it goes to show that when you're repetitive on things you've learned from the past, you retain it much more, up to the percentage of, say, 70 or 80% of that knowledge. That's why microlearning, I believe, and we talk a lot about that in Zeducation, is the future. Not only is it time efficient, it also provides still the powerful impact of retaining knowledge as it would with a traditional course. And I believe that it's definitely going to become much more normal in the future.
Yeah, and I used this analogy before and I'll use it again. It's like going to the gym, right? If you want to stay healthy, fit and strong, you got to do your exercises consistently. You got to go to the gym and do your exercises consistently to maintain it. And it's the same thing with skills. And the cool thing about it, you've got these micro learning or even like shorter version of programs or I interpret as the exercises that you can do consistently. You can do it and you can do how many reps or whatever it is, but that's not the end of the game. You got to come back next week, the week after. And I feel like there's also that principle of consistency or repetition that you talked about, Kalolo, that makes this micro learning work. So even though, yes, it's down to a size that's easy for us to absorb, to articulate, and then to apply, but that's not enough. You got to keep doing it consistently.
And there still needs to be that human factor behind it all. I mean, don't get me wrong. I believe in the future, tech tools will help us learn much more effectively. But I still think that the human factor is still embedded in it. So that wraparound and support, especially for those of low literacy and numeracy, that might be embedded with this type of micro-learning, there still needs to be that human factor, which alludes back, obviously, to the second point that we talked about. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think just before we end this podcast, I just want to touch on what Kalolo said earlier around, you see things like TikTok and Instagram Reels and that, and how, education providers or training providers are now understanding that people love to learn this way. And so they're creating content or like micro short videos that help educate people. So you got to be creative and think outside the box if you're an employer or training provider and you want to keep influencing your tawira or learners. Think outside the classroom as well. Think outside the box in terms of helping them retain some of that knowledge and continue to influence them in the long term as well. So we've got to start doing things differently, and in order to make a difference. But this is what we feel like is the future of education and learning. We talked about AI and how that is really hot at the moment. And how schools and people should start considering learning about it now and not be afraid of it. We talked about soft skills and how that human-to-human element will always be important and that can never be replaced. Things like empathy, respect, and being self-aware and mindful of diversity, for example. And then also micro-learning. It's easier, it's much more digestible and easier for people to apply as well. That's the world we live in. So long are gone the days of the long traditional program, and then and you just got to try and remember things.
Yeah, my last thoughts on top of what Pasi has just said is velocity and mastering skills is very important, but do not expect that knowledge is something that happens overnight. You don't expect a seed to grow into a tree overnight by throwing a whole bunch of water on it. It takes time and consistency. Therefore, I would challenge all those that are listening, especially those L&D people that are listening to this, is to cultivate a strategy that is long-term. We get it. Skills are changing. You have AI here, and you need to start upskilling people on AI. But with that velocity and mastering, just know that happens over time. So really consider what your strategies are in your businesses and what the long-term game is for your organization upskilling people.
Yeah, and you know where to reach out to and who to talk to if you ever need help in that space, and that's us here at Zeducation. We're here to serve and here to help. Thank you for joining us on our podcast.
Ka kite.